Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 161. Did you know 41% of people with strong autistic traits also have fibromyalgia? It works the other way around, too, with 10 to 20% of people with fibromyalgia having autistic traits. Today, Dr. Angela Kingdon is joining me to talk about this connection and the misinformation that is rampant right now around autism. We'll cover the current science and understanding of what exactly autism is and what causes it, along with how to identify autistic traits, get a diagnosis, and my favorite, the difference between saying someone has autism and saying someone is autistic. There are many parallels between autism and fibromyalgia, and I know you are going to be nodding your head along with us as you listen. Now, let me introduce you to our guest. Dr. Angela Kingdon is a dynamic autistic advocate, author, and speaker, renowned for her impactful work in promoting neurodiversity and supporting autistic individuals. As the host of the Autistic Culture podcast, Angela shares her experiences and insights as a queer, late-diagnosed autistic woman, aiming to create a more inclusive and understanding society. Angela's mission is to help autistic people claim their birthright and help create a more neurodiversity-affirming world so that everyone can lead a more emotionally regulated life. But this is not how I know Angela. Way back in 2014, I started thinking about writing a book. One thing led to another, and I ended up on a phone call with Angela, who was a book coach and a publisher at the time. Long story short, I hired Angela, and my first book, Take Back Your Life, was published in spring 2015. We never looked back. Angela has been my friend and my mentor, and I even worked for her company for a while as a mentor coach, working with new authors. Honestly, you and I would not be here right now without the help and support Angela has given me. In fact, this whole podcast was planned around her dining room table. In our conversation today, Angela is going to share her journey from diagnosis to a time of extreme masking and high functioning to the dark days of burnout and hiding in her closet. And I knew her through all of that. This is the real deal. Angela mentions several resources in this episode, which we will have on our show notes page. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/161 and you can grab all of those. You will also hear us talking about self-diagnosis. And that means it's a good reminder for me to remind you that the information we include in this podcast is not meant to be considered medical advice. It is education, and it should not replace consulting with a qualified physician or other healthcare provider. One last thing before we jump into our conversation. This is a long episode, much longer than I would normally do for you. But this time it was necessary. It was necessary to give you the information you need on this important connection between autism and fibromyalgia, and to give you the information and resources you need if you are dealing with this yourself or suspect it in someone you love. Which means I am giving you permission right now up front to pause this episode whenever you need to. Pause it, take a break, get on with your life, then restart the episode when you have a few more minutes. I promise the episode really is worth listening to all the way through to the end. Just take breaks. Now, here is my conversation with Dr. Angela Kingdon. Hey, Angela, welcome to the podcast.
It's so nice to be here.
I know. You know, as long as I've been doing this podcast, and of course, as long as I've known you, I've thought about, I should have you on the podcast, but there was never really like a good topic with what all the things you were doing before. And it's so perfect now to have you come talk about that.
I know. I have listened to several episodes, including the very first one. And now, we finally have something to to dish on together. So this will be fun to talk about and a fun time to talk about it.
Yes, definitely. So one of the statistics that I ran across is, as you know, all the talk that's happening right now about autism, and just I have several students and clients that, you know, have some autistic traits or have autistic kids. And so I started doing a little bit of research about the overlap between them. And one of the studies that I ran across was that 41% of people with quote, strong autistic traits, which I know we'll talk about, but 41% of them have fibromyalgia. And that is a big number. So
It is. And we have talked about this on our show, on the Autistic Culture podcast, because the numbers also go the other way, not exactly the same, but I think something like 10 to 20% of people with fibromyalgia have strong autistic traits. So there's definitely like a huge crossover in populations. And I have some theories on why that is, but I want to start by talking about why we say autistic traits.
I would love to, because I have seen so many little things, and of course, knowing you and hearing your story and all the things that you teach, that's one of the things that brings a little question mark above my head.
Well, there are so many things I'm about to share today about being autistic that I know instinctively, and because I've had guests that have told me, are very similar to the fibromyalgia diagnosis journey. But it is very difficult, especially for women, to get a diagnosis of autism. Now, there are a bunch of reasons for this, and it's really important to this episode for me to give this as background. And so I'll come back to these reasons. But the reason we say autistic traits is because if we said autistic diagnosis, that number would be not much smaller. But that's not a fair representation of who has autism or who is autistic. It's a representation of who can get diagnosed.
Oh, 100%. And I think everybody listening to this understands that because of our own fibromyalgia journey, right? Many of us go years and see so many doctors before we get that stamp of here's an official diagnosis.
And do you guys have a thing in your community where you'll actually say like self-diagnosis is valid?
No,
Is that
actually, no. I think many of us sort of self-diagnose first, but that's one of the things that like I kind of try to teach people. Yes, the diagnosis is important for certain things, but really the thing that's important is that you do what you need to do to take care of yourself, right? So if you sort of self-diagnose yourself with fibromyalgia and then, do the things that, would work.
Get the accommodations you need. Exactly. Who cares? So then a doctor says you don't have fibromyalgia. If these accommodations work, keep doing them.
And that might be why the doctor says you don't.
Right.
I mean, at this stage, if I went to a doctor now, I probably wouldn't be diagnosed. Right.
Yeah. Right. You just basically did the whole podcast. I mean, that is the story. So autistic traits come from, there's a website called Embrace Autism that has a bunch of free online tests you can take. I'm sure there's tests like this for fibromyalgia. It's like an online quiz that is going to measure how many traits of autism you have. We can identify, everyone can identify, you guys can go figure it out right now, whether you have strong autistic traits. Anyone can figure that out. Nobody could doubt it. It's free to figure out. Now, here's where it gets complicated. If you are a woman, or let's say if you are a person of color that has learned there are certain ways you need to behave to stay safe, you can probably mask those traits in certain circumstances. And if you can mask those traits, so for instance, I like to fidget. I'm fidgeting right now. I've got a little fidget toy in my hand. I'm bouncing my leg. I'm stimming. Those are very autistic traits. They're on the quizzes. But if you made me, if I was in court and I was going to go to jail if I fidgeted, and you made me sit like this, I could do it. I could sit up straight and not fidget. it wouldn't be great for my nervous system, but I absolutely could do it. And that will make it almost impossible to get that autism diagnosis. So if you are high masking, or what is sometimes called, and autistic advocates like me groan about this, mild autism.
Yeah, that's
or what used to be called Asperger's, which is what I was diagnosed with. What that mild means is you are an extreme masker. You could mask so much you will die. You could mask yourself to death. And I'm sure there are people who have masked their fibromyalgia to death. They showed up, they cooked Christmas dinner, they wrapped the presents, they smiled for everyone, they played Santa, they stayed up all night for 3 days. And then come January 6th, they're like needing to check themselves in because they've been doing that by drinking or whatever they did to make it through that and mask. So those of us that are high masking, they will often say we have low support needs. Yeah, we have low support needs until we don't, until we're dead, because we are also 9 times more likely to die by suicide. So that is the disease of autistic traits. I don't love the phrase necessarily. I think everyone should be able to get a diagnosis, but because it's so hard and also so expensive, often not covered by insurance, often really you need a referral and you'll get talked down to and told you're crazy and it's in your head and you're watching too many TikToks. And they like to do that to the women. What rich white boys have almost no problem getting a diagnosis. So if you look at, people are talking about the increase in, and by people, I mean the brainworm who now runs the Department of Health, talking about this increase. Like when I was a kid, it was 1 in 2,500 and now it's, 1 in 31. Yeah. What happened is women learned how to speak up for ourselves. The exact same number of rich white 7-year-old boys are being diagnosed. And the rich white 7-year-old boys are getting even better help than they used to get, which is great. But now we also have children of color, we have women, we have non-binary people, we have adults all being identified who were missed for all those years. And they are also getting a lot of what I know you recommend to your clients, which is education on how to create and ask for the accommodations you need to thrive in life. And that might be like bringing sunglasses or getting earplugs or asking for a hotel room at the end of the hall that isn't near the elevator. That is all that's happening, is women and people of color are learning how to stand up for ourselves, how to identify the traits when they're masked, and how to get their needs better supported, which makes a better world for everyone, whether you're diagnosed or not.
That's right. That's right.
The people around you, your boss will be happier, your teacher will be happier, the people in the hotel room next to you will be happy, everybody will be happier. That's all that's happening.
Right. And the other part of this too, I just had this conversation with someone, is that our providers are better educated too. I've seen this happen with fibromyalgia over the last 16 years, right? When I first started doing this work, the statistic for fibromyalgia was 2 to 4% of the population. Now there's research showing that for women, it's 7.7%, right? So it's doubled. But I don't think.
Do you think it went up? Yeah.
No, that's just the people are finally getting diagnosed that should have been diagnosed all along, right? It means that that increase in number to me means that people are finally getting the help that they should be getting.
Yep, exactly. And why would we be mad at that? When somebody says like our identification numbers of autism have gone from 2,500 to 1 in 31, I'm like, oh, thank God. When can we get to the right number? I don't know what the right number is, but do you know the whole, I'm sure everything I teach is stuff you teach in a different way. Do you know the whole left-handed story?
Go ahead.
You must tell the same thing. It has to be. But it's like for years, there was a very small percentage of people that identified as left-handed. Because if you were left-handed, you might be beat, you might have your hand tied behind your back, or people just might look down on you and it might be seen as gross because you're like wiping your ass and eating food with the same hand. It was the sinister hand. And so there weren't many left-handed people. Shocker. And then once that was destigmatized, at the beginning, there was a massive increase in the number of people being identified as left-handed. It was a what is he calling it? An epidemic. Like, was it in the water? Was it the frogs? Like, what was it that was making all these people left-handed? No, it was the same number of left-handed people we always had. The number evened out. I think it's like 11% or something. I think they started destigmatizing it in the 60s, and by maybe like 1985, we're at the same percentage and have stayed there for the last 40 years. That's all that's happening with autism. Why is this confusing? Why are we looking to find the source of the epidemic? Like, and also there was the same amount of autism before and after vaccines were even invented as a concept. So, or whatever toxins that I don't know, are allowing RFK to make a whole boatload of money on the pain of autistic people. So there's nothing to research there. What there is to research is what are the best accommodations for autistic people? What supports do they need? How can we create systems where autistic people can get those supports in school, in their families, and in the workplace so that we can increase the average lifespan, which right now is about 58 years old, according to the Journal of British Psychiatry. The average lifespan of an autistic person is 58, and decreased suicide rates, which for high masking individuals is 7 to 16 times higher for high masking autistics than the general population. That's what we need to be studying.
Yes. Yep. Which is a good time for us to take a quick step back and just for people who might not know, because there isn't a lot of just general education out there on this. What is autism? What does cause it? What does the science say?
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting story because there was the Wakefield study. Andrew Wakefield put out a study. It was largely, it was completely debunked. It was retracted, and he was discredited and lost his license. But this study said that autism was caused by a preservative in the MMR vaccine. And this was many years ago. It was like, I think 1999 or something like that. Immediately like debunked, retracted, but in the wake of the Wakefield paper, many studies were very well funded. Suddenly there was a boon in funding to find what is the actual cause, and more specifically, is the cause autism, is the cause vaccines. And so all these studies were done. Many of them were something called twin studies. Mm. And there were studies done with identical twins and also with, what's the other kind? Fraternal. Yeah. Is that the other kind? So, not identical twins, whatever they're called. So those studies showed like by crazy numbers that autism is genetic. So there is no doubt. There was one study that was 37,000 pairs of twins, and it found that autism is 95% inherited. So 5% of what creates autism is the environment, and 95% is genetics. And just to put that in context, eye color is 99% genetic. So your mom and dad could like have blue eyes, make a blue-eyed baby, and maybe something about other genes or something about the environment could make your eyes hazel instead of blue. But there's a 1% chance of that, like tiny percentage. Height is about 80% heritable. So you think about it, you have two super tall Viking parents, both over 6 feet, Could you have a kid that's 5 feet? Yes. Is it likely to be something like the baby was premature or there's another condition? There's other you could have 5 foot tall kid. Not that common. 80% heritable. Autism is 95%. Slightly less heritable than eye color. That is how, remember when we learned about heritability with like whether you had a hanging earlobe or an attached earlobe, more heritable than earlobe type. We know what causes autism. It is people with autistic traits having sex and making a baby. That is what causes autism. We don't need to look up anything else. There have been so many conclusive studies. And that one study I told you about, which was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2017, that was like the study to end all studies that everyone was like, woo, now we know we could never ask that question again. We are good to go. G2G. No, here we are asking what possibly causes autism. Mm-hmm. It's like so weird. How could we be asking that?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating to autistic people who need all the research dollars we can possibly get. We need the way we experience fibromyalgia is different than non-autistic people. Can we study fibromyalgia and autism and unique accommodations that we need? Like there's so many things we could be studying. Why are we studying what causes autism? Give me that money.
And then on the flip, another I was going to say flip side, but it's not even the flip side. But another aspect of that is treatments, right? If we're talking about something that is like my eyes are hazel instead of my parents' eyes being blue, or I'm left-handed and, whatever, that's not something that you need a treatment for.
We could just enjoy your hazel eyes. We could even enjoy you being 5 feet tall. There are things that you couldn't be a jockey, other words. Maybe that's what you're going to be. Right. There's nothing about autism that needs to be fixed. What needs to be fixed is the environment. The environment generally is not conducive to us. And no matter what co-occurring conditions we're dealing with as autistic people, the number one thing we have to figure out is how to physically and emotionally regulate. And that is hard for all of us in different ways. There's not an Olympics to see who it's harder for. But obviously, if you are non-speaking, which is a co-occurring condition, that adds a level of difficulty. If you are in burnout or menopause, that adds a level of difficulty. If there's one autistic TikTok creator I'm following who has had a migraine since last September, which is like over 6 months, that is going to add a level of difficulty. Now, that particular creator is in theory a low support needs, we would call it, well, we wouldn't, but the Diagnostic Statistical Manual would call it a level 1 autistic, which means she has very low support needs. She could work, she could go to school. That's great, except she's had a migraine for 6 months. And that is not unconnected to being autistic, but it is a co-occurring condition. So what we do need treatments for, can we have better treatments for migraines? Wouldn't that help everyone?
Oh, yes.
Let's have better treatment for migraine. Can we study migraines? Yeah. So there are lots of conditions that are co-occurring with autism. We've talked about the fact that I think, what was the number? 40%?
41% have fibromyalgia.
Of autistic people have fibromyalgia. Can we have more research for fibromyalgia? Can we treat those symptoms, like pain, neurology and pain symptoms are a huge issue for a lot of autistic people. Also, don't you guys have a high co-occurrence with Ehlers-Danlos?
Yeah.
Do you have hypermobility? So we have a high Can we study Ehlers-Danlos? People are dying.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a great thing to study. So, yeah. So anyway, I'm back there. But there are so many things autistic people live with. Autism is not a problem that needs to be solved. Our co-occurring conditions are what need to be solved or accommodated.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And I think too, part of this, you sort of touched on this earlier, that when we make accommodations for one group of people, it actually helps everybody. And a friend of mine just posted this yesterday, that like, you might be fine today, but not everybody is going to be able-bodied until the day they die. Right?
Yeah. I've heard people say, like, disability is the one group almost everybody die. I mean, if you get hit by a bus at 35, maybe not, but almost all of us will join that group as we age. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't we want curb cuts? Why wouldn't we want all the protections? It's going to help most of us. It's going to help our loved ones, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. So how would you... The way that I have sort of been describing autism is just like your brain processing information differently.
That's a great definition. So what autism is, I believe, is a hyperconnected brain. And the reason that happens is that, and this is also explains why the vaccine connection feels so real to parents. So everybody is born with the same number of synapses and the same synaptic process happening when you're a baby. And you'll remember that babies like can't really see or focus till they're 3 months. Their eyes don't really focus in on things. They can't identify their mother until a certain age. Like, they can't really see. And there are lots of things. I remember when I had my son, Jesse, they called it the 4th trimester. There are lots of things in those first few months and those first few years that are still developing outside of the body, that like haven't finished growing. Mm-hmm. So part of that is the synaptical pruning process. So we all have the same number of synapses when we're born. And we are also born with a protein, which is called an mTOR protein. And it's like mammalian rhabdo something. It's a protein. The way I think of this is kind of like insulin. Like, this is a protein the body makes. And what this protein does is it prunes your synapses. So as you're a baby and you're starting to make connections, and you're like, oh, that's a mobile. At first, you only give babies like, I don't know, primary colors or black and white and red or something. It's because they can't see it. And so then as those proteins come into the brainstem, it starts pruning any synapses that aren't relevant. And as your synapses get pruned, you start to be able to see, because there's not all this random information that your brain is having to parse. If you've ever heard people explain, like, you only use 7% of your brain,
Yep.
That's not exactly true, but they're referencing these mTOR proteins and the synaptical pruning, the autophage process. So as your brain is weeding out all this extra information, you are starting to turn the age of somebody getting an MMR vaccine. So I think you get your first one at 6 months, and then you get your second one maybe at 12 months, and then 18 months, something like that. That is when this autophage process is happening.
Now, completely separate from the vaccines.
Totally unrelated, just the same age of development. Yep. The age that we want to give vaccine.
Correlation is not causation.
Not causation, people. Exactly. But it feels like it, I'm sure, as a parent. So what's happening is your kid is starting to have the autophage process. They start to see things. They start to say your name. Maybe they start to walk, like things are happening. And then what it looks like to parents is the kid starts to regress. What's actually happening is that autophage process isn't working how it's supposed to. So as more synapses are growing, the mTOR proteins, we're lacking them, so they can't keep up. So it can't prune. The bushes are going wild. So I used to be able to see, and now I can't see because there's all these like root systems in my way. It got super blurry. Yeah. So at rest, an autistic brain at rest processes 42% more information than a neurotypical brain.
Wow, that's a
Now,
lot.
never mind if you're hungry or you're tired or I don't know, your mom pinched your butt cheek. Like all of that, those synapses, there's so many of them. Now, what are those synapses doing? They're seeing, they're hearing, they're smelling, they're feeling, they're giving us a vestibular sense. And there are there are 8 senses that autistic people have to be consciously aware of how their synaptical pruning was affected. So, for instance, for whatever reason, what autism is, the genetic piece of autism is a genetic resistance to mTOR protein. That is what the genetic thing is. And that resistance in me, for some reason, I am completely face blind and I can't watch a video. Like I can watch a video, but I almost instantly fall asleep. I can listen to TV and look at my cell phone. But if I look at TV, I don't know how to say this. It will make no sense. I can't see it. Like if I watch a space fight on like a episode of Star Wars or Star Trek, like I love Star Trek: The Next Generation, but as soon as the airplanes start battling, I cannot process. I have no idea what's happening. I can't see it. And so I don't watch it. Like accommodation accommodated. Like I just thought I didn't like violence or I didn't like fighting until I realized like it's super frustrating because my brain can't catch up and process it. But when it comes to taste, I'm a super taster and I can literally taste everything, which is not pleasant at all. So whereas like with my husband, he can see everything. I always say he should be a continuity editor because he'll be like, oh, this is where they cut the video, or this person's haircut is slightly different or grew 2 inches. Like, I don't know what he's talking about. I can't see any of that. So the point is that our mTOR resistance, when people say, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, that is because the autophage process in each of us is different. What we share is a resistance to mTOR protein. What is different is how that manifests. For me, I'm hyperlexic, which means I was a super early reader. I'm a super fast reader. For other people, they can't read at all. So those patterns of the way the synapses are pruned are unique person to person, completely unique. It doesn't matter what other co-occurrences you have. The way your body prunes is like it's like a fingerprint. But what we share in common is resistance to mTOR protein and hyperconnected brains. We have more synapses. How many more and what patterns? That's what varies.
Which then makes sense of like, Rain Man, right? The doing super fast calculations of really crazy numbers. You've got a very complicated computer, right? In your head.
Right. But then can barely make a meal.
Right.
So is he high support, low support, medium support? Like it just doesn't make sense to say that. What makes much more sense, I would say similar to fibromyalgia, is look at each autistic person, identify what support needs they have that can be accommodated, identify what needs they have that could be medicated. Like, let's look at like, what would diet and exercise help? Like, for instance, I have a neurodivergent kid who exercise is really helpful for his anxiety. I can literally tell if he skips a day of exercise, just in like the way he'll have pressured speech. Whereas for me, because I have some proprioceptive differences that I get very, very like vertigo when I exercise. So I get really nauseous and I get dysregulated, and it actually makes me more anxious. So there's not one accommodation all autistic people should exercise or no autistic people should exercise. The accommodation is we should all know, I don't care if you're autistic or not, we should all know what our sensory needs are and accommodate them. 100% of people.
Yep. Yep.
Why would that be bad? Why don't we teach that? I think we should teach that in kindergarten to everybody. Identify your needs and get them accommodated.
Yeah.
To the best of your ability. Advocate. You need, like Sophia, my very neurotypical daughter, needs 12 hours of sleep. I need 6. You know what should happen? Sophia should sleep 12 and I should sleep 6. We should just identify that and do that. How does it hurt anyone? Why would that be bad? Can't follow.
Mm-hmm.
It's not stealing something other than the fact she's adorable. And if she's sleeping, you can't, enjoy her beauty. But like, it's not stealing for someone if Sophia sleeps for 12 hours. Like, what's the downside?
Right. It's the exact same with fibromyalgia, right? Everything that you're saying, I'm like, yep.
Yeah, I know. I always think that. There's so many things since I really I had a very different approach. I was diagnosed when I met you, but I had a very different approach to my autism. But I always observed, I read your books. I always observed what you were doing. And I thought, well, if I had fibromyalgia, that is what I would do. And then as I stepped into being autistic instead of having autism, I so many times went back to things I learned from you that I was, this, I've always been impressed by your ideas, and I've incorporated many of your ideas before, I was really identifying as autistic. But then once I did, I was like, oh, this is everything Tami said. Yeah. Now I get why that was our best-selling book for so many years. That's the thing. It doesn't matter if, by the way, whether you have fibromyalgia or not, read Tami's book. It's that, do that.
Yep. It's true. I mean, it's really about knowing your brain and your body and what helps you feel better, what makes you feel worse, doing more of what helps and less of what makes it worse, right?
And sometimes you can't avoid it. Can't, there are things, sometimes you got to go to court. Things happen. So literally today, my neighbor had a leaf blower out, and I did not murder my neighbor. I couldn't leave because I was in the middle of calls that I had to be at home. That was not great for my nervous system. So you can't control everything. But if you can control everything you can control, then it's going to make those other things at least a little easier.
Right. Because you're not already overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about self-diagnosis, but if somebody is listening to our conversation and thinking, there's a lot about this that maybe sounds like me, what would their next steps, what should they do?
Well, I mean, God, the resources now are so amazing. So first of all, whatever your drug of choice, TikTok or Instagram, or if you Pinterest, there's some great stuff on there. You just want to look at lists of autistic traits, and particularly look for autistic traits for women 50 years old. That's me, whatever your category is, because they are different. They show up differently, having to do with societal pressures. Women tend to be much more high masking, but one of my employees at the Autistic Culture Podcast, he is ADHD. So he's autistic and ADHD. And for whatever reason, I would say he has the female version of autism. He's an extreme people pleaser and a high masker. So even though he doesn't show up as a privileged white guy autistic, but the privileged white guy autistic is, because of societal differences, they will take up space with their autism because it's safe to.
So and they louder.
Just I'm into trains. Are you into trains? Do you want to talk about trains? You know what train I like? I like the 125 train. You know what I do? I go that. For a woman, we have been conditioned.
We wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Right. Whether you're neurotypical.
Ever do.
So there's intersectionality that comes into play that, if you are if you're a white kid in the South in America and your special interest is guns, which it 100% could be, You might carry guns all the time, talk about guns. Now try doing that if you're Black and poor and, in the Northeast, in Boston. Like, no, you cannot walk around with lots of guns and talk about them all the time. So there are just things that show up differently because of intersectionality, which includes age. And so you want to find the lists of things that hit you. But in general, if you have ever, I'm thinking of who I think your audience is. So if you have ever been told or thought you were a highly sensitive person or an HSP, I'm diagnosing you right now just so you know you're autistic. You can call it whatever you want. Every HSP list is just a list of autistic traits. I have never met an HSP that is not autistic. So right there, if you already know that term, welcome to the club. Happy Aunt Mitzvah. Great place to start.
Mitzvah.
What an HSP, you can tell even in the name, is you are highly sensitive. So if you cried all the time, if you complained about pain, if you struggle with pain scales and knowing what to do when someone shows you 10 happy faces of different happy and sadness levels, if you always had earaches as a kid growing up, that would be another example. If you are a super taster like me and you were always called a picky eater, if there are only 6 foods you eat and it is something you fight about intensely with your family who thinks you should eat more to be healthy, those are your same foods. You're fine. Keep eating them. Fed is better than dead. You're good. Special interests. So I use the stereotypical trains example. My special interest has always been writing. So I wrote my first book at 5, and continue to write about a book a year and help people write books. But I'm also very into a kind of obscure band called Crowded House, and took off 4 years of my life to follow them around the world. That right there, that's huge classic sign of autism. Yes. People don't, and everybody in the line, everybody that gets to the Crowded House concerts at 10 a.m. and stands in line, they are either autistic or the loved one of an autistic person that is humoring them. So I have been standing in line with these people for 30 years. They're all my autistic friends. We all started figuring it out, late in our Crowded House journey. We're also known for stimming. So I talked about that earlier, like playing with fidget toys. My thing as a kid was the way I described myself is I said I was a pyromaniac. I wasn't. I always had matches. I would steal matches from everywhere to light candles in my room. And then I liked putting my fingers in the candle wax. So my room was filled with candle wax. And what I thought was I was a pyromaniac. I was never a pyromaniac. I was a sensory nut, and I was stimming with wax. I liked it hot. I liked it cold. I liked to roll it. I liked to smush it. It was before we had, this was the 80s. We didn't have all the putty and stimmy things we have now.
Yeah.
So I was also a crystal nut. Crystals and gemstones and rocks. And I was always going to rock shows, and then I would collect them and organize them and alphabetize them and color code them. These are all very autistic traits. Also echolalia, which is repeating phrases. So there is a band called Squeeze, and they have this song, Pulling Muscles from a Shell. So imagine you are eating seafood and there is a shell on the beach that has a mussel in it, and you could take the mussel and eat it. That's their song, Pulling Muscles from a Shell. But from a shell sounded like for Michelle for me. And for about 5 years straight, I said from a shell, 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 for Michelle, from a shell, from a shell, from a shell, from a shell, from a shell. And I would literally do that for years and years and years and couldn't stop. That is echolalia. And then if you do it in your head, it's echolosia. And actually, in the time you knew me, there was a time period where I spoke almost exclusively in Hamilton lyrics. You may remember the Hamilton lyric phase.
I do.
That is also autistic. So yeah. So those are just a few autistic traits, but look up a list. If you're thinking it's you, look up a list. I also have a quiz. If you go to bit.ly/autistic culture quiz, it's all lowercase, all one word. You can take my quiz, which is non-medical, non-pathologized. But if you get a 6 or higher on my quiz, you will win the autism award, which is just high autistic trait. It just means it's exactly the thing you said at the beginning, high autistic traits. And then if you want to then pursue a medical diagnosis, I always say that's really important for a few reasons. If you need to use the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yep.
So you do need a diagnosis if you are saying you're being discriminated against in housing or workplace. It does protect you. And so that's a really good reason. If you need accommodations at work or at school and just asking for them doesn't work, I would start by just asking for them. I would say like, hey, these are the hours that will work for me, whatever the things are you need. And if your employer says no, you can say, okay, based on this, I'm going to go get an autism diagnosis and I will request this as a medical accommodation under the ADA. And then they might do it without you getting an accommodation if they know you're going to go get a diagnosis. There are some reasons not to. And I think this is why, even though I was diagnosed when my son was 6, but I never really talked about it. I didn't never talk about it. It was mentioned in my books, but I didn't really make a super big deal about it. And I don't know if this is conscious or unconscious, but it can affect custody. It will affect how people see you. People will start to say things like at work, like, oh, I don't know if you can do this because of your autism. And it's something you've been doing for years and it's very annoying. So there are some reasons not to. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about immigration issues. It can affect your immigration. And of course it could change. I am sure I would not be surprised if the USA stopped people now, if, I don't know, in some attempt to help autistic people, they said, we're not letting any other autistic immigrants in. I don't know. But there are countries, including Australia, New Zealand, that say they won't take people with autism. What they really mean is, we don't want you to come here to take advantage of our medical system. They really are referencing higher support needs and people who won't be able to work. Now, that's still not cool, but sometimes you'll see things that might scare you about getting a diagnosis that it's not exactly how it works. But yeah, it's vulnerable to have a diagnosis. And honestly, I don't think most people need one. I think most people basically need your book, Take Back Your Life, and to learn to take back their life. And then if you feel like you need legal protections, then I would go seek a formal diagnosis. But so many people actually need a diagnosis for school accommodations and work accommodations that if you don't actually need one, my advice is it's not going to be a great experience. It's going to be unpleasant. It's going to be very likely you will be told you're not autistic because you could literally drive yourself to the doctor's appointment.
That's right. Yep.
So I guess if you have extreme burnout and make a couple of attempts on your own life, then you can get diagnosed, but they really don't want you to do it preventatively. They would like you to almost die. That is the preference.
You know, it's kind of like fibromyalgia in many ways, again, because, having a diagnosis can really help in certain situations. Maybe you need that diagnosis to get the treatment that you need, like for your insurance to approve it or whatever. Maybe you need the diagnosis because you're going to have to file for disability. And if you don't have a diagnosis, then why are you disabled, right? So there can be absolutely reasons for that. But there's also all the stigma that goes with it, right? People see, the F word, see fibromyalgia in your medical chart and stop looking. right?
I was with beloved family this weekend. And I can't remember what we were talking about or how this came up. Oh, we were talking about like we were just gossiping. So it was like an in-laws friend, like, oh, that's her friend from college. And she's like, she has one of those made up, is it fibromyalgia? She has one of those things where it's like people make it up. And I was like,
Let me tell you something.
yes. Do you? She's like, no, then it wasn't fibromyalgia. It's another one. Is it chronic fatigue? What's the and I'm like, oh my God, those are why someone would make it. What is the positive? What is the plus side of making it up?
Right.
But people think, why do people think that? Where does it come from? I don't know, but people have that in their heads. And now, thanks to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, people have it in their heads that people are making up ADHD and autism. And I'm like, very low upside, my friend. I'm going to make up being skinny. I'm going to make up being a perfect size 6. I'm making that shit up. Like, why would I make this up?
Right. There's no upside to this at all. Yep.
That's what I'm like. I think people think I'm stealing. Like I tell you I'm autistic and you give me $10 or you give me your job or I'm like, what am I stealing if I bring sunglasses from you? What do you lose? I bring sunglasses. I put them on inside. Let's just say. Now you have lost what? This is bad. What? You just don't like looking at me with sunglasses inside? How is this harming you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But yeah, it's very interesting how in many ways people work so hard to get an autism diagnosis. And they really think, I watch them think this. They really think they're going to get that piece of paper from their doctor and then they're going to tell their mom and their best friend and their doctor. And they're like, oh my God, you've been going through this? This must be so hard for you. What can we do? Let's sit down and figure out some accommodation. And then instead they get, you don't seem autistic to me. You don't look autistic to me. I mean, you seem fine. Labels aren't, you don't need that label. You're a beautiful girl. You don't need that label.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'll just save my life. Can you be excited? And they're like, don't worry about that. You just do your best. You just keep showing up. You be you. And you're like, wait, what is happening? The work is inside. The diagnosis is nothing. It's nothing. It's meaningless. I had my diagnosis for 7 years before I did the work. Before I did the work of unmasking, identifying my accommodations, learning how to ask for them, all stuff I learned from you many years before, but which helped. Like I had good models. You were definitely a very good model in my life, but it is still hard to figure out how do you say those words? How do you get them out of your mouth? And I had like a heart to heart with my family about the fact that my body really struggles to regulate temperature. It's very, very difficult for me to regulate temperature. And I have no idea if I'm hot or cold. And they can't even figure it out. Like it's very hard to even explain. It has to do with interoceptive differences. And now when I show up, they bring out like ice packs and blankets and they just like throw them in the middle of the room. And they're like, we want you here. And it takes 2 seconds to grab an ice pack and a blanket. And so there's an electric blanket and there's a cooler with ice packs in it. And they plop it in the middle of the room. And they're like, yeah, whatever you need, take it. Make yourself comfortable. I was at a funeral this week and I left the funeral for 45 minutes, the after party thingy. I left the funeral and I slept for 45 minutes in someone's car. I was like, I can keep going, but if I keep going, I will be masking. And if I mask, there will be consequences. And this funeral is not for someone I particularly want to have 2 weeks of consequences for.
Right. Yes. I remember you talking once about two different weddings. One where you went and you masked, right? And just like powered through the thing. And then the other situation where you like, I don't know, went in the bathroom and like laid down on
I did. That's what I did. That was Carmi's wedding.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I did. Yeah. I didn't even know that. It's like I would have opinions about like I hate weddings that were I hate masking that hard. And so it's like my stepson's wedding is coming up in October, and I've already started my preparations so that I really want to enjoy that wedding. I'm so excited. And one of the accommodations that I made for myself at Carmi's wedding, which I swear to God, my mom would have disowned me, is I wore sneakers with a dress to a wedding.
Yes, I loved that.
I can't tell you how hard that was. It was literally like I am being kicked off the island. I will never talk to my family again. Like it was so hard for me to not wear very uncomfortable high heels because that's what you wear to a wedding.
Right.
So I had like a super cute dress that I thought I might wear to my stepson's wedding, but I wore it. I had to practice wear it. And it was itchy. Yeah. And if I'm itchy all day, I'm going to be cranky and I'm going to pick a fight and I'm going to be tired for 2 weeks after. That is my hangover from an itchy dress.
Yeah.
If it was like cutting under my arm and then I'll have chafing and then I'll have like a little scab and then I'll pick the scab, and I'm also 50 and so 52. And so like the scab doesn't heal as fast. And then I'm going to be putting Vaseline under my arm and that will feel sticky and slide. No, hard pass. I'm out.
Yep. Yep. I love that. My second book launch, I tried on earrings the few weeks before the event to see which ones I could actually handle wearing for that long. Right.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Those are that is accessible to everyone. You could try on your earrings right now for an event in 6 months.
Yep.
It's fine. It turns out there is not a rule against that. And I do so many things so much earlier now. And I do so many fewer things. Mm-hmm. I do a lot fewer things.
Yeah, making the choices of which things are really the most important.
But I enjoy the things I do a lot more. I remember them a lot more. I'm much more present. But if somebody said to me like, hey, there's, I don't know, a Shakespeare play 4 hours away, I would love to go with you. I would think, oh my God, they know I love Shakespeare. Like they want to be with me. I am the only one with a car. They don't have a car. It's a theater that you can't get to by public transportation. I would have said yes so fast. I would have driven all the way there. I would have driven back. The play would have been over at 11 p.m. I would have been driving till 4 a.m. Never would I imagine saying no. Because first of all, like a big part of autism is like social challenges. So I'd be like, here's a way to have a friendship. I am useful. And second of all, it's like my special interest and spin bonding is a major thing. So I'm like, someone recognized that I love Shakespeare. And like, so I would not even think about what are my actual needs? Like, does this work for me? I would just be so excited somebody wanted me for a change.
Right, right. And that entire story, like I know we're talking about autism, but you guys, every single thing that we're talking about here, you could just substitute in fibromyalgia, right? How many times have you put yourself in a flare for weeks because you drove
the right thing to do? Right. Right. And, 20 years ago, she did something. She picked you up at the airport when you went to Berlin. So I obviously have to do this.
Right. Right. And all the shoulds that we put on ourselves, that really are like, they really only exist in our heads. And there are some that do exist in society, right? There are societal norms, but that doesn't mean you can't break them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And I do think you need a model and someone to, if I was talking to someone every week, which isn't what happened for me, and I was like, oh, this week, these are the things I did. And they could kind of mirror back and ask me some questions to help me reflect on, like, was that the right choice for me? Not that you can go back in time and change it, but just like, okay, now that you know, would you choose that again? And I feel like I needed years of kind of replaying that to figure out it's a huge identity shift of like, wait, if I'm not the person who will drop everything and drive 4 hours to see a Shakespeare play, who the hell am I then? A lady that lays on the couch?
Yep.
Am I a lady that lays on the couch? Like, I had to find out who I was. And the answer is somebody who identifies and advocates for my needs and models that for other people, which I learned from you. And I saw how much you doing that helped me with no diagnosis that I was connecting. It's like that is the identity, is like somebody that thinks I am valuable enough. I have a 3-year-old grandniece and I want Winter to just, for it to be just obvious. Why would you not identify your needs and advocate for them?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It'd be just so weird. What is the alternative? You drive 4 hours and burn yourself out for somebody you're not even really friends with? I'm not clear. Explain it again.
You really want to model that.
Right. I don't. But I was. I didn't even know that. I thought that was just living. I didn't know that's what I was doing.
Yeah. It's so funny too. You just perfectly described what a coaching call is like with a fibro coach.
That I can see why you would need it.
Yeah.
I can see why you need it because it's so hard to see. I would have argued. I would have been like, look, it's a wedding. You have to wear heels. There are pictures. Those pictures are going to be on Carvey's mantle for the next 40 years. And I'm going to be in those pictures with sneakers. Her mom is like my mom's age. People are going to talk about me. I could have argued all day long for why I needed to wear high heels.
Yeah.
And it just sounds silly. I can barely make those arguments now, like once you get it. But when you're there, it's like, but you don't understand. I'm not going to be in a picture wearing a dress and sneakers.
Yep, exactly. Now, there is something that I told you this before we started recording. I've been dying to talk to you about this. And I think will be great for people to hear, because I think this is a shift in perception, kind of like what we're talking about. And you briefly said earlier, making the shift from having autism to being autistic. And I would love to dive into that, because I think that, again, there's some really important parallels with fibromyalgia with that.
Yeah, I was diagnosed in October of 2012. The word Asperger's was removed from the DSM. The Asperger's and autism diagnosis was combined under the name autism spectrum. But I was diagnosed with Asperger's in October of 2012 by a doctor. It felt to me like a medical condition, and it felt like a private medical condition. I'm not a secretive person. So, like, for instance, I'm anemic, and that is a private medical condition. I'm certainly happy to talk about anemia if you'd like to talk about it. Like, it wasn't like it was a top secret in my life, but it's a thing I walked around talking about. It was a private medical condition. And I knew the treatment for it. And the treatment, if you are diagnosed as an adult, generally that is prescribed, is cognitive behavioral therapy, which basically equates to do your best to have a good attitude and act as normal as possible. Identify what acting normal is and do that. And so I did that. I went to CBT. And I acted normal and tried not to be inconvenient to anyone as much as possible. And I had Asperger's, is what I would have said. I know in books and in podcasts, I would mention it. I would be like, well, I believe the way I said it was, I'm Aspie, or I have Asperger's. And it was a thing I knew about myself. That didn't feel like an identity. It felt like a thing. If they had a pill to make it go away, I would take the pill, but they didn't. And so I was going to make the best of it and try not to, I wanted to overcome it. I wanted to like make the best of it and overcome it. And then I went into a severe autistic burnout, which I suspect is how a lot of people get diagnosed with fibromyalgia, is they have a severe, what do you call it?
Yeah, a flare or
a crash. Yeah. That was basically it. I spent 3 months in my closet, could not get out of my closet, couldn't move, couldn't talk, couldn't work. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. I thought it was medical. I thought it was depression. I thought it was some sort of cancer. Like, I did not know what was wrong with me, but I knew I could not leave the house. And then I started kind of coincidentally reading about autism, because it kept, when I would Google my symptoms, it would keep coming up. So one of my challenges was I lost my voice and I couldn't speak, and I couldn't figure out what that was. And I Googled everything and it kept coming.
You're looking right here for the problem, right?
Yeah. Well, I did all of these spiritual things. I was like, oh, my chakras are blocked. I need to do a ayahuasca journey. I need to do colonics. I need to take vitamins, magnesium. I did all the woo-woo treatments, alternative medical treatments. And I actually had a naturopath who, her name was Kate. Now I can't even remember her last name, but she was great. And she was like, you are the most compliant patient I've ever had. You did everything I asked you to do. I fasted. I don't know what the hell she was having me do. Antihistamine, some sort of histamine, something. Like, I did all the things. Nothing was working. And she was like, I think this might not be something that is nutrition based. And I was like, okay, I'm back at square one. And so then I went back and I started identifying that, hey, all these autistic things are the things that I can't seem to treat with colonics or diet. And then I started reading what actually autistic advocates said. And one of the first things they said was, if you identify as autistic, not a medical condition you want to cure, but a sociological or cultural difference, and you begin to just develop a cultural competency in how hyperconnected autistic brains are, many of your symptoms will decrease just by not fighting them, but accommodating them. And so the more and more I identified what my body needed and accommodated them, the more the, let's call it flare up or crash, stopped flaring up. And I got my voice back and my stomach, and I had vertigo for almost a year, and that went away, and I was able to go in cars again. And so slowly everything came back by making the switch from thinking of myself as someone who had autism that I wanted to cure, to being someone who was autistic, just like I'm someone that's right-handed and brown-eyed and 5'5". Just not great, not bad, just it is a fact of my life that I have brown eyes, I am 5'5", I am autistic, I am Italian American. Those things are true, not changing, even if I do more colonics or acupuncture or get extra massages or talk to dead people. Or do more cognitive behavioral therapy. None of that will make me not Italian American, right-handed, brown-eyed, and 5'5", or autistic. Mm-hmm. That was the starting place. And until I got to that ground level, the chasing of being someone else also meant I could only be a broken neurotypical.
Right.
But when I could be a fully whole autistic person, then a lot of that collateral damage just didn't have a place to go anymore.
Mm-hmm. And don't I remember you saying that there's a difference in like suicide rates and things like that?
Yeah, huge. Well, first of all, 87% of autistic people prefer to be called autistic. And if your head is doing something like it sounds like you're calling someone the R word, it is how you say it. So I don't recommend you say like, oh, Bobby's so autistic, which is how the kids say it now. So if you listen to a bunch of 13-year-olds, they no longer use the R word. They use the word autistic to mean the R word. That is still not allowed. I'm not recommending that. So it is more like if you think of the 70s Black is Beautiful campaign, you want to say it with that level of love. So I am autistic and proud. Happy At Mitzvah. If you find the truth of your autistic self, it is like finding out you were a swan and not a duck all along. And Hans Christian Andersen was autistic, and The Ugly Duckling is our story of being autistic. You are a neuro swan. We have been waiting for you. That is how you say you're autistic, not just like, oh, God, can you be a little less autistic right now? That would be not cool. So just to demonstrate. And if your brain's not doing that, if saying it nicely and with love feels like you're saying a swear, you've got some internalized ableism to work on, or just some ableism if you're not autistic.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. And I feel like I said this to you before we started recording, but I feel like that's kind of what I did with my own fibromyalgia. Right?
Yeah, tell me about that more, because it's interesting. I've never thought about it that way, but I can see it.
And there isn't a word for, versus I have autism.
Fibromyalgic.
Fibromyalgia. We don't have
fibromyalgistic.
But I know, like early on, fibromyalgia was something I was trying to fix. It was something I was trying to fight. It was something that was broken in me. And just to be super clear, there are things broken in your body with fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
Like there is stuff going wrong, right?
Right.
But I think when I made the shift to, okay, this is who I am. This just happens to be the body that I live in. And what do I need to have that body feel as good as possible?
Yeah.
Everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because then it didn't end up being something I was continually fighting against. Right. I think so often we treat our bodies like the printer in the corner that doesn't quite work right, and we cuss at it and we hit it on the side and we're like, why won't you work? And that's how we treat our own bodies,
Right.
or our own minds. Right. And when we can make that shift to, okay, this is who I am. This is what I've got. This is what I'm working with. And, I don't have a word for fibromyalgistic, but I do talk about the fact that I live in a fibro body.
Yeah. 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 And I think there is something about that acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Just there is a pressure. Like we know stress causes health issues or causes inflammation, like all those things. And it's like, if you just take that, I wish my body wasn't a fibro body out. Like it just is. Like, I don't know. I wish I had blue eyes. I wish I could grow long hair. I don't know what to tell you. Like, but that is not the case. And so we could spend a whole bunch of energy, units of energy, spoons on that. But the day that you can just drop that is like, to me, where the healing can begin. Because that's just like, if you're going to use all your energy on that, God, we have very little energy left to figure out what you need for accommodations and to like get your body into a more rested and relaxed state where it can do some repair.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think it's a milestone. It's very counterintuitive and it just sounds like you're giving up. And if you talk to the wrong people, I think they'll say that, like, no, you can beat this thing. Be a fibro warrior. Like, get out there. You can do this. And it's like, no, I can. The big thing we get pushback on is labels. Like, do you need to talk about being fibro all the time? Like, that's what we get. It's like, why do you have to talk about autism? Because this is who I am. And I am integrating that identity. And as I integrate that identity, it is going to be a topic for me. And if it's not a topic for you, then, that shows your level of support for me, which will show me how much time I can safely spend with you. For now.
Right. Not that
for
it's
now.
good or bad or anything else, but just helps you put them into the right category so you're not going to the wrong person when you need a lot of support.
Right. Exactly. And there will be other times where you won't need to talk about it.
Yeah.
But for where you are now, integrating that identity, having a community, I don't know if you have a group aspect, but I think having a community of autistic people has been one of the major game changers for me. Because when everyone's like, oh my God, did you see that show? Or, oh my God, like I was so tired this weekend, I had to say no to 4 things. And everyone's like, yeah, that really sucked. Like just having that shared community is so different than people telling you autism is a superpower. You probably don't have to deal with that one. But like, no, I think it's so great. Like, I have gotten to meet a lot of autistic people, and they are really just my little superheroes. I just love autistic people so much. I'm like, oh my God, I can't with you.
Right, because that's a kind of ableism too.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, for sure.
And like what we would see with our fibromyalgia, it would be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. You've accomplished so much even though you have fibromyalgia.
Ah.
Like, why couldn't I accomplish this anyway?
And then you're like, thank you. But I feel dirty. Yeah, exactly. And then also, do I want to have a conversation and be a fibromyalgia educator? So then I'll just say thank you because I know that rule. Like I don't always want to be an autism educator. I do tonight. Very happy to do that. But yeah, I don't always want that role. Sometimes I just want, to order a croissant.
Right. Oh my goodness. So true. So true. I'm just looking at my questions, see if I had anything else for you. We kind of talked about these. I have 2 last things that we didn't talk about. We sort of did, kind of not. One of them is, we talked about autistic traits, right? Strong autistic traits. But one of our people said that someone had strong autistic traits, but not enough to qualify as having autism.
Ah, yeah. So it's a tricky thing because most diagnosis is wrong. Do you guys have problems with bad fibromyalgia? Like people get diagnosed. For women, we get diagnosed as bipolar a lot. So yep. or hysteria, if you would like to go back in time.
It's just stress. It's just anxiety.
So it's hard to comment specifically, but here is if they had a good diagnostician, what that means. So there are 2 primary categories that you need to check off. And then there are 3 more categories that have to do with severity. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a ton of autistic traits, and essentially they are not impacting your ability to work, live, or have successful relationships, then you would have autistic traits, but not be autistic. But almost the only time this ever happens is people who are good at masking.
Yeah.
And so if they have autistic traits and they aren't autistic enough to be considered autistic, it means they're going to have to get close to taking their own life before we will give them a diagnosis. So that is the reason why we say self-diagnosis is valid, is if you can fake it, then very often you aren't autistic enough to be diagnosed. for me, if you have autistic traits, you are autistic. That is the criteria for me. If you have autistic traits, that makes you autistic. If your traits are not killing you right now, that's fantastic. Do more advocacy work. But that is what it means, is it's the severity and your ability to mask. And that's because the chart, in my opinion, is wrong. It's pathologized. And so it's saying what makes this a medical condition that we would need to treat. And obviously we don't have to treat it if you've already treated it yourself, because the treatment is getting good at pretending not to have autism.
Which is wrong, just to be clear.
Doesn't work. So, of course, if you're really good at masking, they're going to say you're not autistic enough. You have autistic traits, but not enough to be considered autistic. Yeah, because you're masking.
It reminds me of clients that I've had who were filing for disability. And when they show up for their, evaluation or whatever.
Yeah.
They're showing up on a day that they're doing better than normal. Otherwise,
because they canceled it. Right.
You're right. Yep. Which kind of leads into the other question, which is just the spectrum. Now, I always thought that term, the spectrum, was, this is before I knew you and learned so much. But I used to think that was the spectrum of a very unfunctional.
Yeah, the line,
like
the degrees,
functioning.
Yeah, so, a little bit autistic and a lot of bit autistic.
Yeah. So, what is the spectrum? Is that still the right term to use, a correct term to use? And then what about low functioning, high functioning?
Yeah,
all of that.
Great questions. So, first of all, autistic advocates don't love the word spectrum. It's not totally, so it is the correct diagnosis in the diagnostic statistical manual. So if your insurance is paying for anything, they're calling it autism spectrum disorder. That is the legal name. In England, they have switched that largely to autism spectrum condition. Do appreciate condition more than disorder.
Yes.
And I hear some thoughtful medical practitioners in the US saying ASC. You might see that. That's what it is. The problem, though, is with the word spectrum, in that people do think a little bit to a lot. But if you think about a political spectrum and you think about the difference between, let's say, libertarians and extreme progressives, they might agree on gay marriage. They would agree. A libertarian and progressive would be like, yes, gay marriage. They might agree on abortion. They might be like, yes, abortion, freedom in your bedroom, freedom with your doctor. But then if we talked about taxes, a libertarian would be like, no taxes. And a progressive would be like, let's tax people and let's pay for roads and hospitals and healthcare. Right? So they're not right to left. There are some things where they agree and some things where they disagree. So we present the spectrum as a wheel. And there are some areas of that wheel, like where we might be extreme. Let's say we're talking about sensory issues. Like for me with smell, I am almost on the outer edge of that spectrum. I'm at the edge. I'm like, make, no taxes for anyone, make all drugs legal. I'm at the extreme end of that spectrum. But then when it comes to something else, like let's say executive function, I'm at the very low end of that spectrum. So I'm gay marriage for all. So am I a little autistic or am I a lot autistic? When it comes to where you are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Also, I just said that my executive functioning is really high because I like run a business and I'm an author and I can write books and I have a PhD and multiple master's degrees, right? That's very high. I'll tell you what, my executive functioning was not very high for 3 months when I couldn't leave my house or my closet.
Right. And there might be certain areas of your life that you're better or worse at. I mean, we all are, right? Like you might be terrible about making phone calls, but you
have you seen? Yeah, I was going to say horrible. Long. Yep, that is 100% me. Yep. And have you ever seen me? I'm sure you have. Have you seen me in a kitchen?
I've seen you walk through a kitchen.
Yes, you have. That's correct. Kind of like a lost duck.
I think there's something in here
I
somewhere.
have like no executive functioning in the kitchen. My whole brain shuts down. It looks like I'm lying because I could go from, you and I had many weeks that we spent at my house together where I was running meetings and running events and I was the big boss lady and I'm like, do this, do that. Yeah. Then telling somebody else to do something else. And then we walk in the kitchen and I'd be like, I don't know where the spoons are. Hold on. Let me ask Carmi where the spoon. And it's like, is this like making it up? She clearly knows where the spoons are. She knew where the Sharpies were. How much harder is it to find the whiteboard than a toaster? Spectrum, friends.
Yep. Do you find that you can use up your ability to do those things?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, when we would do those 3-day events and then afterwards you don't know who you are.
I had less functioning, like even during those events, I had less functioning in the kitchen because I was so focused. Like when I was talking to you about your business and starting your podcast, which we talked about at my kitchen table, you're like, I think I'm going to do a podcast. I'm like, great, let's do it. Someday I'll go on it and talk about autism. No, we didn't say that. I'm so present. It's using up so many CPUs. All my extra synapses are firing that then a question like, where are your spoons? Is like, where are my spoons? Ironic. Where are my spoons? I'm like, I could figure this out, but it feels so hard. And I know the answer is probably a drawer, but to access it after I've been operating on those other levels, I don't have access. And after an event, any of my events, I used to do like 4 3-day events a month. And after an event, I couldn't talk for a full 24 hours. Sometimes I would say things like words, no talkie. Or I would type, but it was gone. It was gone. I don't usually anymore give up that kind of access, but I gave so much. There was nothing there. So where is that on the spectrum? Because I am situationally non-speaking. So I am not considered, which the C, D, and E lines of the DSM are what determine if you're level 1, 2, or 3. Level 3 would be like non-speaking, often with like major executive inability to go to the bathroom on your own, possibly intellectual disabilities. Like, no way am I a level 3. But let me tell you, the day after an event, pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty close. It was not great. And I mean, that's what led to a major burnout, suicidal ideation, not being able to leave my house for months. Like, because don't do that. So where I am on the spectrum depends on some genetic stuff, some environmental stuff, my ability to accommodate myself, some other health stuff. There have been parts in my menopause journey that have moved where I am in the spectrum. So there are many things that affect it. It is first of all, I have a spiky profile. So in some places, I'm far to an extreme one way or another. And then also it is a variable condition that changes day to day, situation to situation. So.
Yep. Just like us. just like us, you know, if you got enough sleep, if you ate the right food, the other stress in your life, if the lights are too bright, there's too much noise, if the leaf blower's outside, right? All those things
Mm-hmm.
affect the level of symptoms we might be experiencing at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally true.
So as we wrap up, I would
Yes.
love for you to talk to the person who's listening, who's like, she sees me. Tell people how they can find you and just like, you know, speak from your heart to theirs. What do you want?
Yay. Well, first of all, like I know there's so many people that fibromyalgia is causing so much pain that thinking about the joy of autism is just like a luxury you can't afford yourself right now. So always, 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 whatever your meat body is doing, getting that regulated comes first. And I know you're in good hands listening to this podcast. Like, read Tami's book, listen to her stuff. A lot of what I teach requires you to not be necessarily in extreme pain, and whether you're autistic or not, like learning the stuff Tami will teach you about fibromyalgia will help, and you'll hear a lot of it is the same. So there's no pressure. This isn't one more thing. If you've already got 5 doctor's appointments, like there's no urgency with this. But what I want you to know is there is joy in your autistic neurokin and in finding the family of your neurotype. And so when you think about how you felt the first time you heard the story of the ugly duckling and how weird it would be to grow up with this family and always feel like you were doing everything wrong, no matter how hard you tried. And then one day you find this family where you fit in. That is what is waiting for you over in what we call Autistica, which is our magical land. Every week on the Autistic Culture Podcast, we meet for an hour a week in a land we call Autistica, where you are with your neurokin, with your fellow neuroswans, and where you can unmask and be inside your culture. If you think of how exhausting it would be every day to be in Japan as an exchange student from Iowa, that is what every day of your life has felt like. And when you can find a community like the one that we have at the Autistic Culture Podcast, where you can be yourself and in your culture and do things your way, it is such a relief and there is so much joy. My focus is on helping you find and celebrate your special interests, to learn how to stim openly and figure out if it's sticking your hands in candle wax, how to get that sensation every day. Maybe it's heavy blankets, weighted blankets, or maybe it's getting 16 cats, or whatever your thing is, being able to find all of the, or saying from Michelle for Michelle every day, all day, nonstop, like finding your autistic pleasures and being able to embrace them will free up cycle. I'm not saying it will solve actual like nerve pain that's driving you crazy. Like there are other things for that are real, but there is joy. And if you are identifying with the traits that we've talked about as autistic and you have the spoons to go explore it, take the quiz, listen to some episodes of the podcast, go to embraceautism.com, take some other online quizzes, read some books and memoirs like Becca-Laurie Hector's Always Bring Your Sunglasses is a great one. And just start to try on that identity. You don't have to go book a doctor's appointment to get an evaluation. Just try on the identity quietly. You don't have to tell anyone, and see if you feel more at home, because that's the goal. When you're at home, you're going to heal faster. So that's my message, autisticculturepodcast.com. Look at our list of episodes, find one that's on, especially if you're a Taylor Swift person or Andy Warhol or John McEnroe or Questlove, Emily Dickinson, Thomas Jefferson, Hans Christian Andersen. Find your autistic person or interest of choice and have a listen to an episode, and you will find some autistic joy, I hope.
It's a great podcast. My favorite one is still the one you guys did on Sesame Street.
Oh, Sesame Street's a good one. Yeah, Julia. Awesome. That's that. And I'm so glad I got to share this. And I just want to say, like, there is such a bond between the fibromyalgia and autism communities. And I love that we're doing a little crossover episode here. I definitely need to get you on our show talking about this too, because it's very important to both of our communities. So
yes, I agree. And that would be some super interesting research. There's just so many similarities in just so many things that it just feels like there's going to be some.
There's a reason why. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. And for you listening, hang on. I'll have a little bit more information for you in a minute. And that wraps up my conversation with Dr. Angela Kingdon. Now, I know that was a long episode, so I really, really hope that you hit pause and you took breaks, or that you were at least comfortable as you were listening, because that is what that episode was about, right? Now, I know Angela mentioned several resources during our conversation, and to make it super easy for you, we have collected all of those into today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/161. Angela's newest book, Adult Autism Home Assessment, is being written right now, and the Autistic Culture Podcast members are getting early chapters, audiobook, all sorts of other goodies. So if that is something that you're interested in, and I have a feeling many of you are, just based on the title alone, Adult Autism Home Assessment, just connect through either the show notes in this podcast episode, where we'll have links to where you can connect with Angela, or just search for the Autistic Culture Podcast right here in the app that you're listening to this episode. They are pretty much everywhere, just like we are, so you can search them out there. Again, today's show notes is fibromyalgiapodcast.com/161. And now I have got this week's listener shout out for you. This is an email that Kim sent to me, and it is actually about her coach, Giselle. And I love getting emails like this because it reminds me of the ripple effect, right? I trained Giselle. Giselle went out and helped Kim. Kim is going to take whatever she learned from Giselle and she's going to keep spreading it. And this, my friends, is how we change the world. So thank you so much for sending this in, Kim. This is what she had to say. She said, Giselle is my health coach, and man, what a woman. I struggled for so long, and now she's come to me through you, and we sing your praises every session, knowing that we had it in us all along, but you put in the effort I didn't have the strength for, and thank God. Thank you so much for that, Kim. And really, all of us need that support, need that hand up. I wouldn't even be here without my coach back in the day. My coach didn't actually really know anything about fibromyalgia, but just her love, her support, the person to strategize with, to figure things out with, to hold me accountable, to keep me going. Like, that is really what made all of this happen. So Kim, sure, I put in that effort, but you know what? I had my own coach too that helped me get here. So yes, Giselle is awesome. And thank you so much for that, Kim. And thank you for listening today. Like I said, that was a long episode. We normally don't go quite that long. But like I said, it was a lot of really good information. And I just really wanted to make sure you had all of that. So thank you for listening all the way through to the end. And we will see you back here next time.